our fifth panelist, Dr. Julie Banacao, a member of the DEVCON dev team and a science research specialist at Philippine Space Agency, serves as a systems engineer and technical lead for the MULA satellite project. All right. Anyone? Any questions? Yes?
I'm Shilpina from the Daily newspaper. My question is, I just heard that the top the biggest shortage in IT is the cybersecurity workers. How much really does the Philippines need in terms of cybersecurity? And since cybersecurity is a global issue, what are we doing about it?
So we're also the #2 attacked country in Southeast Asia, probably the world. So clearly there's a massive shortage. I think I'll try to explain it in the sense that I think even in private companies, cybersecurity is not a priority in the Philippines. And IT in general is not a priority. And the reason is we're actually still in a transition phase where companies still make money basically paying underpaid workers, just to sound a little political. So it's always HR versus procurement in any company. Do you buy technology or do you just hire people? Now you gross that up to the entire country, you have a massive underinvestment in not just cyber, but IT in general. How much should we invest? I think it's always good to think of it in terms of, it's similar to insurance. If you have an amount to insure, let's say the GDP of the Philippines, then you must be willing to pay a fraction of that amount, anywhere from 1% to maybe even 5%. So I'll talk about the BPO industry, for example. It's about 8% of our GDP, roughly 40 odd billion plus. If you have a $40 billion industry, shouldn't you at least spend $500 million in terms of the jobs, in terms of assets? And actually the BPOs don't have a problem with that. 60% of Wall Street outsources to the Philippines. But what about the rest of the Philippines? I don't think there is any expertise there. The recent cyber attacks are actually not complicated ones. These are just weak passwords, they're defacing Congress and all that. So in other words, the reason why we're a popular target for cyber attacks is because it's so easy to attack the Philippines. So, and I think as a punchline, going back to the whole insurer and amount, no one I know, at least in the government, has made an equation that cybersecurity equals economic growth. And this is similar to any company. The business and the IT people don't talk to each other. That's what everyone has been saying this morning. I think the business people in government and the IT people in government need to talk. So whenever you have cyber attacks, leave it to the ICT, forget about it. But they forget that if these BPOs suddenly realize that it's not safe to send work to the Philippines, that $40 billion just disappears. So it's actually in our best interest to invest in cybersecurity, but you hardly hear NET or Department of Finance talking about it. So that's the problem. And that's my take.
Yeah, and just to key into that, and then I'll elaborate at Tom. So I don't think we have a skill set gap, right? So I think we have enough smart Filipinos that can fulfill the role of a cybersecurity expert. I think what we have is the lack of cybersecurity posture with the companies. In other words, companies don't care enough about cybersecurity yet in the Philippines. Because if we do care, then we start to cooperate, right? The attacks are actually uniform, right? Phishing is phishing. A lot of the attacks that we see are pattern matching, and they're repeated. So I think that the awareness of the company, and they'll learn as they get hit, and they'll learn the hard way. And we don't want to learn the hard way in the Philippines, so we are in the process of actually doing that. A lot of people get ransomware in the Philippines, they just don't talk about it. A lot of my friends actually have gone through that. And that's because, just like there's something that's kind of a taboo that, oh, I got attacked, I don't want to talk about it, right? I think the proper attitude should be, I got attacked, I want to share what I learned, so that everybody else can pick up from that learning and let's collectively combat cybersecurity. That's the only way we can afford it, right? Because it's expensive to actually combat cybersecurity. So it's really a combination of awareness, right? And to let people know to really care about it, and also some kind of organization amongst businesses so that we address this issue as a collective effort. We can't be one company at a time.
So I can't speak to the Philippines specifically. What I can talk about is what, in the early days of the Silicon Valley, we ended up doing. It was very much similar to what Winston described. I recall eBay, Yahoo, there were several of us that were hacked by a particular person. Now, these are companies that were arch enemies. And when I was at eBay, we hated Yahoo. They tried to compete with us on every way. One of the things that we found is the best way to combat these types of activities was bring the best and brightest together and share the practical experience, publish an attack and how they got through and how you prevent it, or publish ways in which you can identify and find a hacker very, very quickly with the use of things like honeypots, which was the technology that we created at Egypt to figure out how hackers were getting in, and then we close those pipes off. The second part that I would touch on is cybersecurity really has two frames to it. One is, if you will, the broader, the phishing expeditions, things like that. Now, there's plenty of technology out there that will help you to manage that and reduce that risk. But there's also a deeper component to cybersecurity, which is how do you protect your customers' data and how that works. So in that second part of what I did to help, because we didn't have available cybersecurity expertise, is we train people who are engineers to work on cybersecurity as well as a part of their responsibilities until there was enough push to do what we call security design. So on any app that I work on, there's a security person that's in there helping us to design to make sure it is the most secure that it can be. Now that doesn't go without conflict between engineers and security people, but the question becomes a business one. How much are you willing? How much risk are you willing to have? Because there's no attack surface that's safe. Eventually, someone is going to get through, and you have to figure out how, why, and why would it be you if you're not paying attention. So that's the world that we live in today, and it's going to get even more complex when you start introducing things like generative AI, because those large learning models can be compromised. And now all of a sudden you've got hallucinations that are being generated as a result of data that was hacked.
Loaded first question. Thank you.
To follow up on that loaded first question, recently 2 government agencies have been hacked. Apparently, there's data that has been linked. Now, how, as you industry leaders in the private sector, help out the government to identify all those things, and how do we become proponent on safeguarding those data, especially PhilHealth, SSS, are slowly becoming digital. And those are very, as you said, we are the second most targeted country. So there are state-sponsored attacks that we know of. I know 2 countries that do that, but I have no evident proof. But how do you push this as on a government level? How can we help for this to become part of the national agenda?
That's right. So private sector and public sector have many areas where they already operate, APPs, etc. Unfortunately, cyber is not one of them, or not broadly. And again, I'll be a little critical. Remember when PhilHealth first came out, and they said no member data was leaked, and then they said maybe 800 members were leaked, and then they put out a portal, NPC put out a portal, there were 1 million senior citizens that were leaked. And then Monday this week, there were 13 million members that were leaked. And then yesterday, there was 20 million members. So, okay, so many things are wrong with that. Number one, there's a tendency to downplay the leak. Like they keep saying, the first thing they keep saying is there's no sensitive data. But PII, personally identifiable information, was the currency that the hackers want to get, other than the ransom. PhilHealth was for ransom, the others were not for ransom. And that also points to there are many types of actors. Some are for profit, some are sounding like hacktivists, but the real risk is always personally identifiable information, because they can sell that in the dark web, and that's financial crime, it's blackmail. So it's still for me very glaring that maybe I used to think it's like a conspiracy, it's a cover up, but I think it's just plain and simple ignorance. Yes, I'll use that word too. But okay, private sector can help, but government has to ask for help. We can't just waltz into the DICT and book a meeting. It's not really that easy. Occasionally you can, but usually you can't. And then more importantly, I think there's no culture. We don't value data too much. And you mentioned state-sponsored cyber attacks. Certainly those are possible, but those are galactic issues. So we care about that, but we don't care about admin 123. That's the password. You know, these are really, that's the most common password. You know, you can probably try that at random. It's probably how they compromise Congress. So, and I'm not joking. It's because there's no awareness, there's no culture, and there's this kind of, oh, it's not sensitive. Again, I'm gonna pick on Philda because they were the first. They had a press conference on the deadline of Medusa, if you remember that. And anyway, long story short, they said, we'll just wait for them to release the data. It's probably fabricated. I mean, Winston said, what kind of a posture is that? You do not challenge people who have already clearly compromised your system. And then there was another tragic bit of news. Their antivirus systems were expired because it got stuck in procurement. I mean, how tragic is that? I mean, procurement goes by budgets. You didn't budget for it, or you didn't get bidders. It just points to they really probably didn't prioritize it. I mean, there are systems for that. There are processes for that. So going back to the first point, private sector is ready to help. As I said, the BPO sector have the best cyber people because you have the likes of JP Morgan and Capital One. They protect those assets. But they have to reach out, you know, and I guess that's something that we need to manage. That's my point.
It's getting harder and harder on these questions. When we talk about the weather, now the other thing I want to add on government, no. So DEVCON actually did a lot of work in the pandemic, right? It's really hard to help, by the way. Primarily because we haven't created the frameworks by which citizenry can participate in government innovation, right? I think if you want to look at it a little bit more fundamentally, it's like there has to be a way for us to help in a way that is productive. So cybersecurity needs a little bit more regulatory push. If there is a need for businesses that service a lot of consumers to have insurance, and government pushes that, then more people will get insurance, then insurance will get cheaper. And then we'll have more coverage, right? Those kinds of stuff is needed. So it doesn't actually end in the executive branch, but the legislative actually needs to spend a little bit more time creating laws that require people to then be accountable for cybersecurity issues in the country. So I think there is good news. DICT, this flavor around, actually is more aware of cybersecurity issues, and they are trying to do something about it. I think that the other thing that we just need to be aware as citizens of giving our data to government is just protect it even more. That's where it's, for instance, assume it's been compromised, right? Because you probably given your data to Phil says at one point you've given your data to Phil Health at one point, so your data is out there, in other words. Or you've voter registration, if you remember that as well. So I think the government will get better, but it'll take time. I think it's just incumbent upon us to just assume that we've already been hacked and have your own hygiene in terms of your cybersecurity activities.
Non-cyber questions?
Like AI and jobs, or
I have a question. Sorry, just DEVCON, we're DEVCON Pro. So basically, the Filipinos have a lot of great programmers, and especially sabihin na natin na almost all the great hackers were Filipinos at one point. Many are. I have known a few, but I'm not going to say their names. But how do we harness that creativity and skill in terms of, there's a lot of programmers there that we don't know yet, that are underpaid, under subsidized, or stuck in the wrong job. Is there something that DEVCON's working out to build on the industry here in the Philippines to get it more mainstream acceptance. Right now, the data sciences are known to the people in the tech industry. It's not widespread knowledge that there's data science. So there's a need for data science. So is there something that DEVCON can do, through us, being part of the media, that you can expand the knowledge of the mainstream normies, the Filipinos out there that are not in the loop?
Right. We can do something controversial on this. So, first of all, we do have the talent, right? I think, me and a few other entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley has built startups that competed with the best in Silicon Valley with Filipino engineering capabilities. So, we have the talent. I think what we lack is exposure, and that can be done by, number one, getting more venture capital in the Philippines so we do build products as opposed to be an outsourced SI service provider stuff, right? And so for the longest time when I was involved in the PSIA, it's a little bit of a rub between encouraging more BPO participants or encouraging more real software activities. So I think we need to seek out higher level skills and higher level work relating to creating products from software or hardware or any combination of both. So those are kind of really important. The third, that nobody really talks about yet, but I think will be our formula that gets us there fastest than anything else, is just super encourage freelancing, right? And if we encourage, and we will encourage that at DEVCON, not only to recognize and teach the skills beyond code, a lot of the things that Tom talked about today, which is how do you interact with a client, how do you gather functional requirements, how do you create solutions, right? As opposed to how do I write code given to me by a BA from a PM to, you know what I mean? Like, once we get to that higher level function, you will have a lot of Filipinos that are taking advantage of global opportunities right at home, right? And so I think DEVCON will spend more time doing that. I think the future of our Filipino talent being utilized at a higher value is in freelancing. And that will create some disruption, right? So if you're, I have an SI shop, right? I will be disrupted by that, but we're preparing for it. But I think it's time for the Filipinos to take advantage of where we're good at and better than even other countries, like India or China, is that apart from great coding skills, we have a better propensity to understand business requirements, better propensity to have good communications. And so I think if you see DEVCON going forward from maybe next year or so, the reason why we created DEVCON Pro is to really encourage everyone to maximize your potential as a technical practitioner. And DEVCON will be the place to spend more time doing that. Inviting people like Tom, creating this panel to encourage everyone to go beyond just writing code.
So basically, you're saying that you're looking at more of solutions provider for the freelance, addressing specific needs rather than just a service that encourages a code that's given to them.
So we want freelancing, we want Filipinos to solve the world's problems, from the Philippines, right, and make that work, right, as opposed to being the second or third provider, from somebody else. Oops, sorry. It's controversial.
So I work for Accenture, and Accenture's been in the Philippines for more than 3 decades, and I think over the past few years, there's a realization that we've been a training ground for technology talent, not just for our competitors, but even for some of our employees who want to do other things also. So we support DEVCON, we've supported DEVCON Pro this first instance because we see the value. So 2 years ago, for example, Accenture released 80 million pesos in grants to 9 academic institutions with attached technology business incubators so that they could fund startups that particularly technologies that we thought needed a boost. So everything from artificial intelligence to IoT connected solutions to healthcare, focus areas, etc. And the good news is that initial grant was successful. There were multiple patents created. Some startups actually elevated themselves also. Right? But there were questions about, Arvin, why are we doing this? Aren't we creating competition for ourselves? My point of view is very much aligned with what Vincent said. A healthy ecosystem benefits everyone. right? And just to give you a peek on what we do in Accenture, again, I've been there for close to 3 decades now. That uplifting from being just a developer to actually becoming the product owner, to becoming actually the offering owner, to our teams in the Philippines developing assets, not just for clients of the Philippines, but for global clients. I've seen that evolution within our organization also. And I do hope, and we do support again this vision, that we create more opportunities for everyone in the IT industry in the Philippines. Because we agree there is global talent in the Philippines, right? And it benefits everyone if you go in the same direction.
One of the things that made Silicon Valley so successful is the fact that that ecosystem existed. One of the things as an outsider looking at the Philippines that I find interesting is you have successful entrepreneurs here who have made it in the US. And there is a formula for success that they can share, but that needs to become a priority for whether it's the local councils or the national government as an area of focus. Because there's nothing like success to breed more success. And if you don't have the ecosystem here, for example, what Winston was alluding to with venture capital, there are ways in which you can attract those things, and you can use government institutions to help do that. One of the reasons that California was so attractive to people, particularly in the VC community, is they put together proper tax regulations that allowed them to make a lot of money. And those that made a lot of money, I mean, I'll give you an example. Have you guys heard of the PayPal Mafia? Yeah. Elon Musk. There were a whole bunch of, I had the opportunity to work with those individuals that were in the PayPal Mafia. They went on to span companies that were worth trillions in total value from what was a multi-billion-dollar sale to my company at eBay. So you have to think that way. You have to encourage business and entrepreneurs to behave in that manner, and you have to make it so that they can versus putting up barriers to prevent it.
Thank you. I'm Zeno Martinez from TechBlade. I'd like to ask a question from the entrepreneur, the non-tech entrepreneur side. We appreciate a lot the intent of DEVCON to provide Filipino talents to the world. However, in the Philippines, tech adoption itself is already very minuscule. And we often hear time and again all these leaders saying that they want to enable, empower MSMEs, where I'm coming from. We are not tech, and we are the most vulnerable to even tech scams, right? And the two words digital transformation are already nose bleeding for us because the government doesn't attempt to even simplify, to make us understand about it. And now we have cybersecurity. This is also, by the way, a question for boomers like me, and because we are also a marginalized sector, I think. We get cancelled so often. How do you do? I think if you have not yet, I hope you address this sector, the MSME. It's called SME in the US, small and medium businesses. I hope you also come up with a program later on. There's a very promising things here about grants for startups, but this is a different sector. We are supposed to be the 90+% backbone of the Philippine economy, and yet nobody's doing anything about us. So, what do you propose? We let the government and everyone else hear about it,
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is not, I just recently met one of the founders of this company, startup called 10X Me Academy. And their focus is actually your sector. And it's not an endorsement from Accenture, to be very clear. I met them a few weeks ago. They visited our innovation hub. And they're doing interesting things. They're actually creating short courses to educate small to medium enterprise owners to actually understand how to use these technologies. They've seen the problem that he raised actually. And they talked to us because they were interested in using some of our virtual learning capabilities. Right? It's more of an aside at this point. But yeah, there are people that have seen your problem and they're trying to solve your problem. So again, not an endorsement, there may be other companies doing it out there, but they seem to be, well, you just said it, there seems to be a market for their solution. Okay.
We are actually doing something about this at DEVCON. So we did partner with USA on a program called Strengthening Partnership for
Digital Enterprise.
Emerging digital or enhancing digital enterprise. So there's a program specifically called for MSME, right? And I think I will echo one of the points my wife always says, right? Technology is a part of our life, whether you're a child, college student, or an adult professional, or an MSME owner. So the one thing I'd start feeding back to you also is that you don't have a choice. You're gonna need to learn technology to survive as a business, no matter what. So it's not a misfortune. It's something that it's what you need. It's now, you know how you need to have a store, you need to have a license, you need to have BIR. Now it's you need to understand technology. It's a prerequisite to business, no matter what your size is. Number one. Number two, though, what the government's doing and what grant makers like USA is doing is putting you on a rail. In other words, understanding collective needs and providing simplified solutions. Like for instance, basic step of what if I want to take digital payments, right? How does it make it super easy for you to accept InstaPay, to accept credit cards, right? Basic stuff. What if you want to go online so that people can order from your site? How do you make that even easier? So these are called technology rails. So it's almost think of it as a pre-built, simplified, SME-focused technology. So you'll see more and more of that. So there is actually a lot of effort being put into there. So that's the good news. USA, DTI, DEVCON, and a few other entities are doing that. So I think that's on the way. But what I do want to encourage you, small business user, is for you to recognize and realize that you don't have a choice. You're gonna need to learn technology to continue to be in business. So the sooner you realize that, the sooner you opens your mind to utilize all these tools.
Yeah. Zeno, may I trouble you? What business do you have?
Oh,
in general?
Okay. Sorry. I've been exposed a lot on the startup scene in Metro Manila. So recently, my team of like-minded older generation people have decided to set up in Iloilo. Why? Because after a brief vacation, I realized, what are we doing in Metro Manila? Sure. We cannot even solve with digital solutions the African swine flu problem. No?
Yes, sir.
And we understand that the value of data, but we can't even find it anywhere in the large budget and also it's not supposed to be political. No? So things like that. So it was actually not even a real, it was a dagok on the head actually. No? Why can't we take our learning to where it will have the most impact? So we set up, inspired by Talino Venture Labs, we set up sort of a venture lab in Iloilo to assist entrepreneurs on the basic gaps. Basic gaps is information and knowledge. So that's what we're doing. We're also, by the way, into other things like agri trading, uso yan, making food products cheaper in so many innovative ways. No? So we're also into brick and mortar businesses as well, and we realize that we are the most affected with all this rapid. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It's good that you're setting up a venture lab. I'll give you, in general terms, the main difference between startups in the Philippines and startups everywhere else. Startups in the Philippines wants to solve problems in the Philippines. Startups everywhere else wants to solve global problems. Like my own startup, we won the NASA Space Apps Challenge 3 times. No one knows us. Our first win was for a dengue detection system using satellite data and digital data. We went to the DOH, they did not want to buy it. We found a client in Africa. So that's, I think, the biggest problem. And I'm sure as a small business owner, technology is not cheap. So you need to justify your investment in your bottom line, right? You probably will not be able to justify it just by servicing the Philippines. Even though there's a big demand, you went to Iloilo, massive demand, no purchasing power. The only purchasing power you have is in NCR. So you're gonna have to ride that wave. I challenge every startup in the Philippines, find solutions for Singapore, find solutions for Vietnam, find solutions for Europe. Because that's the only way you can justify the scale, exactly what Winston said. We should use Filipino talent to solve global problems. It's actually happening now via brain drain. So the moment you train all of these cybersecurity experts, these data scientists, they're on a plane to the US, they're on a plane to Singapore. But if you as an entrepreneur are able to keep them here, pay them well, because you have clients abroad, earn foreign currency, basically beat the BPOs at their own game, perhaps. Problem is, the BPOs have tax incentives. You don't. So that's where the government comes in. There has to be an incentive. There has to be fiscal, policy to help grow startups. The only place you can run to is DOST. And guess what? They only fund schools. And you're going to go through schools. I'll see you in 2030. I'm not joking, because it's so backed up. And that's a small drop in the bucket. So if you're a VC, please create startups that solve global problems.
One thing I'd like to add to that. One of the advantages that I see in the Philippines is that you have great tech and you have great service. What's happening today, what we were figuring out with Ascenso in Toledo Labs, is that the combination of those two things provides a service to the US market that no one else can. That is, small businesses in the US, they don't have IT budgets. Their budgets are quite small. So you have to be able to drop the software into their hands, customize it so it looks like it's theirs, and then have a service behind it that helps to manage that whole process much better. All of those things are skills that I have found, having worked with Winston in Toledo, that are available inside the Philippines. It's just a matter of making them available. But as was said before, you can't build things for the Filipino market. I mean, think about the country that I know the best, Israel. Cybersecurity. They don't build stuff. Sure, they start building it for internal, but then they commercialize it globally. And that's how Startup Nation worked. They weren't selling to the Israeli economy. It's only 8 million people. They were selling to the billions and billions of people worldwide. And I think that's a mindset that the Philippines needs to have. You have the skill sets here. You have some of the infrastructure that needs to be improved. You have experienced people that have done it before. You need to leverage them. Like you, I'm a boomer. I'm useless in the U.S., but would love to help the Philippines compete with the U.S. in that respect. Because I know that there are so many startups that don't have the experience that I have lived through 20 times. I mean, what is it? Failure is a great learning mechanism for you to ultimately get to success. And I can tell you I've failed many times, but I've also been very successful. Leveraging that is really important, particularly as you move forward. As we talked about, technology is changing like crazy, but guess what? It's centralized compute, decentralized compute. Centralized compute, i.e. the cloud, decentralized compute with IoT. So understanding those broader those broader trends as an experienced technologist helps me in deciding what I'm going to invest in personally in the future. So I think that I can't speak to the government aspects of the Philippines, but that ecosystem, if it's here, the Philippines will take off like a rocket, particularly if they think globally.
Okay, I'm just for context. I work for the Philippine government. I work for the, but I work for the. I'm not from the industry. I work for the Philippine Space Agency. So all of these things that you're saying digital transformation and all, and then you put it up a notch when you talk about, okay, digital transformation through space. So it becomes a little bit more far-fetched, both literally and figuratively. They talked about the role of the governments in doing all these things, being a platform so that the industry can have a more like solid foundation and where they can build startups and all. Maybe I'll talk about the context of the Philippine Space Agency and what we try to do. We're still very new, and since we work at space, it's also very new with some of the people. When we talk to people, they say space. We have a space agency, like, but we're poor. Those are the stuff that we hear. But anyways, what we try to do, especially with contributing to these things, so for technology, we try, because we could only do so much, we're a very small agency, we try to reach the LGU. So we think that they know more the grassroots and the communities that we can serve. So like, for example, we try to train the LGUs on the use of satellite data on farming or for fishing. And then our expectation for these activities is the LGUs, once trained, they will be the ones to actually engage the SMEs, for example, in their community on how to use these technologies so that we can live everyone together. Since we know that if we try to do everything all at once, and it will just be like the effort will not be focused, and it will become semi-quote-unquote useless. But if we focus on one thing, and then these will be the ones that can multiply the effort. So this can be one strategy. And also, we're very thankful with the efforts from the industry, since we know that the government can do this alone. And the help of the industry is really very paramount in achieving the things that we have discussed here earlier. Sorry.
Thank you so much, panelists. I'm sorry, but we have to cut short this session. I know there's some interesting topics to discuss, but to end this session, I want all of the panelists to answer this question. With all the emerging technologies and trends, what are your advice for developers, non-developers, and businesses to be future ready and create better impact in the world? Anyone?
So particularly when it comes to developers, one of the things that I think that groups like DEVCON and others can do, increasingly in the United States, when you talk to people like Mark Benioff, or you speak to people like Larry Ellison, they have a tendency to say college degrees are a good thing, but certifications are critical. So being able to put together the programs that get engineers certified, they're going to have to learn some basics before they start that process, but if they're interested in it, using a program like DEVCON to be able to gain that interest, assess that interest, and to provide them with the certifications. I can tell you that, for example, my daughter just went through project management certification. She did the whole thing on Google. It cost her like $150. The difference between her pay as a teacher versus a project manager in high tech, it's 3x, okay? But she couldn't even go in, even though she ran projects, because she didn't have the certification. The same is true for Python certifications, for database certifications. These are all readily available, they're standardized, and having engineers here that are available and willing to take on those roles and understand that they're not going to come in as an architect, they're going to work their way up there. And there's a goal, part of what DEVCON can do is educate young developers about what that process is. Approximately how long does it take? What would elongate that? An economic collapse of some sort or another. What could shorten that? Being able to have those kinds of discussions with young people so that they understand what they're up against, because I think it was very interesting. I forget who had the chart that said that this generation, the millennials and then Gen Z, they look at things in 2 to 3 year time horizons. I looked at things for a 15-year time horizon. So being able to appeal to that 2 to 3 year time horizon with certain certifications that will allow you to maximize your income and get you educated at the same time, in my mind, is one of the things that DEVCON could do very, very well and be very successful with.
So the demand for developers is so high. There's a very high chance any developer will have a very decent, salary. So I'm not too worried about developers. We don't need more developers. We need more developer leaders. We need leaders who code, and we need coders who lead. Because if we're stuck in this kind of trope where, I'm just going to learn, what is it now, Python, it used to be Java, and before that,
Yeah.
C++. People will pay you well for that. But you're not moving the needle where it matters, which is generating startups, generating investments, and we're just going to perpetuate this cycle. Unfortunately, it does require a change in mindset. It requires a little bit of ambition. It requires risk. And these are things that I just have to say, speaking as a leader who codes, because I didn't study comp sci, I taught myself how to code myself. Risk taking is different for them. They just want a decent pay and really, really good salaries in a low-cost country. So in a way, we're in this vicious cycle. And that's why things have moved in public sector, in private sector. Everyone's comfortable. And then you get cyber attacks. It's just weird. So I feel we need a bit more ambition. If you're a starting dev, if you're Gen Z, you're impatient, yes, stay impatient. Maybe do take a job. But the point is to learn skills, and then later transition to entrepreneurship as fast as you can. Every one of the great entrepreneurs started out as devs and then started companies. Many of them were self-taught. They didn't really stay in school. I'm not saying don't drop out, but put school in the right place. What they teach you in school is outdated by default. So certifications come in immediately. Unfortunately, school only matters if you just want a job, because they look for diplomas. No one requires a diploma to be an entrepreneur. So if you're very impatient, just start a company and investors will come. And be very good at what you do. Be very good. Don't settle for mediocrity. Unfortunately, you can get paid well for mediocrity. So those are just my hot takes. Thank you.
There's a question.
Hello, my name is Lexi, and I am actually an undergraduate for software engineering. I would like to ask how would you recommend a developer to start? Because I've been studying for almost 5 years now, since senior high school, and I'm still an undergraduate. So, how would you recommend a IT, comp sci, or anyone in that field to start with?
Maybe I'll try to answer her question and your question at the same time. So we hire a lot of people in Accenture, and we're known for sending people to boot camps. But we also encourage people to learn things on their own. So the answer to your question is, what should people do about technology? Someone connected also to that question about how do we help MSMEs actually. There needs to be an elevation in terms of the technology savviness of the whole country in general. Right? We need to move the baseline up, essentially, and that's not just about technology at the core, but even again topics like security and other things as well. I think to your question, just start building something. So the great thing, I envy your generation. My generation, for me to get access to compute, I had to stay in the university's computer lab because that was the only place that I could access tools, right? You go to OpenAI, you go to Azure, you go to GitHub, you have access to so many things, which I know might be overwhelming also. It's potentially part of the problem. I think DEVCON does a great job of providing venues, and the partners of DEVCON also do other things like organizing hackathons, etc. They're there for you to start using your chops, right? And potentially earn money along the way also. So start using it, start embracing it. You don't need to wait for a formal job to start practicing a lot of these things. Right? My team learns a lot now from Stack Overflow and Reddit and all of the online forums, as much as we learn also from our own formal training as well. Right? So in a good way, you have access to pretty much the same things. So you're also competitive that way. take advantage of that. Okay?
Wait, thank you. So I was trying to figure out which question to answer. But so first things first, I will encourage you to take a unique path. Open source has been a great source of opportunity for you to level up to the world. And if and when you can, try to join any one of those projects in open source. Something that excites you, right? If you just do a search, there's a project for something that you would like to be a part of. Then you immediately affiliate yourself to a community of practice. And that actually is the fastest, best way for you to get into the profession that you actually like. So a lot of the fresh grads like, oh, I just gotta do this because I need a job when I graduate, right? But if you start early while you're still at school to pick and affiliate yourself to a community of practice that speaks to you, you're probably gonna be more successful. And that would be my advice. And then in terms of like how to do that with scale, right? DEVCON wants to emulate a few things that have been successful. So for instance, when open source was new and you're an open source developer who's developed a code that contributed to Apache, you actually make 30 to 50% more salary when you get a job in the US. Because that's a community validated skill set, right? I think what we're gonna do more at DEVCON with our volunteers is to do that. We did that precisely when the pandemic came. We invited people to join an initiative called DCTX, and then we codified all the contributions into, I think, GitHub or GitLab, right? And asked them to do contributor license agreement so that when employers come calling, you can already show your resume in form of code. And more importantly, you already show yourself as somebody who likes to code and do impact at the same time. So these are the things that we can do at DEVCON. We have a great leadership now that points to and helps pros to do that. And by the way, that's Dom De Leon who's here. Just give him a big round of applause. But I think we can do something ourselves as Filipinos, despite all this lack of government support, lack of opportunity, we're being remote. There's baby steps to do that. Is create credibility to our geeks, and that's branding, right? Either you're part of Apache Software Foundation or part of DEVCON. A lot of DEVCON volunteers are now undersecretaries or CTOs or CEOs of companies, so that helps quite a bit. So I think that's that. Now, the one thing that I also highly encourage is I actually see freelancers as entrepreneurs, right? Imagine if we're able to consider them micro businesses and they pay taxes like they're small business as opposed to freelancers. I think the Philippines actually really is uniquely qualified to become the nation of global freelancers that produces great products, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to brand ourselves. Na pag gawang Pinoy, it's better. Or pag gawang Pinoy, it's a better product. So we haven't really thought about that yet, but this is something that we would like to do at DEVCON. We'd like your help in press to help us kind of popularize that. And I think people like to be part of success. Even government, they bend when they want to affiliate themselves to something that works. So maybe we'll do it positively that way, because if you just complain, nothing happens.
Everything they said. So yeah, it's good that you already attend this kind of DEVCON, because I would always say seek opportunities and don't be afraid to break things. Because in tech, everything is fast-paced. So sometimes here in the Philippines, especially since the foundation for startups is really not there. Like we don't have a culture of startups like other countries like the US or Singapore. Since you already have this community, it's good that you have DEVCON. You can already learn from the people who have done it before. They know how the environment works in the Philippines. I mean, it's not as if there are no success stories already, so you can learn from those. And sometimes success comes not just from what you have as your skills, but also from the people you know. Because you already learn from their mistakes, you learn from their experience, and they can already pave the path for you. Like, of course, it will still be very difficult, but it will be a little less with their help. So try to find mentors. I think some of them you can find here already. And then just continue learning. And if something fails, then there's always the next time. So yeah, don't give up.
Thank you so much, everyone. Alright, so let's alright, so before we end this, we would like to acknowledge some of our champions who made this event possible. First is Shrish Shan Digit of Senior Developer Evangelist of Zoho Creator, Executive Director of EPC and Executive Director of DEVCON, Dom De Leon, as well as President of CSDA, Pam De Merino, and founder of DEVCON Kids. So we maybe request our panel speakers to stand up so we can take a photo.
You can ask our speakers afterwards for one-on-one interviews while we're having lunch outside.
It's actually a racket.
Forward.
Wala ka bang 0.5 sila?
We're gonna take the 0.5. Alright.
What am I doing?
A little bit closer.
So if you want to start here.
You can move forward.
Sir. I don't know if I want it. I'll go over. So I think it'll be in front.
I have a bigger stomach.
So we need to do side by side. Mas important.
Right behind you then. Okay, there. Is that better? Yes.
1, 2, 3.